Welcome to the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center's Social Justice Community Forum series. I'm Ashley Sinner, the museum's Outreach and Public Relations Coordinator. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center is located on the traditional homelands of the Pasquosa. We acknowledge the traditional lands and offer respect and gratitude to the Pasquosa and to the diverse Indigenous peoples that reside in North Central Washington today. It is the mission of the museum to gather, engage, and educate the community on the history, culture, and diversity of our region. The museum is a place where we can meet with our neighbors, learn about issues important to our community and our world, and discuss our thoughts and opinions. While we're not able to gather physically, we are eager to serve in this role virtually by gathering in forums like this to inspire engagement and cultivate conversation. Our goal today is to engage in a thoughtful, inclusive, and open-minded discussion about food security in North Central Washington and the local efforts to provide food security for the most vulnerable in our community. It is my privilege to introduce the panel joining me today. We have Thom Nees, Executive Director of Serve Wenatchee, Alan Walker, Executive Director, Chelan-Douglas Action Council, Kim Romain-Bondi, Executive Director, Classroom in Bloom, Bob Mark, Community Cupboard Program Manager for Upper Valley Mend, and Tracy Falkner Carlson, Community Outreach for Wenatchee First United Methodist Church. Thanks to sponsorships from Molina Healthcare and Coordinated Care of Washington, live Spanish translation is provided today by Joe Cortez with Claire's Languages. If you are logged into Zoom, you have the option of listening to the translated audio channel, and you can do this by clicking on the icon of the world and selecting the Spanish option. Before we begin, I want to remind our panelists to speak a little bit slower than your normal rate to help out our translator. If you're joining us live and have questions for the panel, please submit them through the Zoom Q&As or chats located at the bottom of the screen. And if you're on a mobile device, they're available at the top of your screen. Our staff will do our best to address as many of these questions as we're able to. As I said in the beginning, we're unable today to stream live on Facebook, but we will post a recording there later for anyone who missed us. Food security means not only knowing where your next meal will come from, but it also means you have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meet your food preferences and dietary needs for an active and healthy life. Access to quality and nutritious food is fundamental to human existence. Yet, even before the pandemic hit, millions of Americans were either unable to acquire enough food to meet their needs, or they were uncertain of where their next meal might come from. So my first kind of question for you all is to tell us what your organization does to address food insecurity, and how has that changed since the beginning of the pandemic? Does anyone want to volunteer to go first, or I will choose someone?
I don't mind kicking us off, Ashley, and
Thank you.
get the group started, and maybe folks can formulate their thoughts around this as well. But Chelan-Douglas Community Action Council has been a part of addressing food insecurity needs for 56 years now, since 1965 in the region. And I think as we reflect back on the past 11 months, how that has changed for our organization in trying to meet the needs. Certainly development of new partnerships has been a part of that, getting a little bit more creative on how we address the needs. And so in the last 11 months, we've shifted up how we distribute food to a box of food style system. We started doing door-to-door monthly delivery to roughly 250 senior residents each month with door-to-door delivery. The food pantries throughout the region, the 11 food pantries, some of those were operating every week and others were not, but we increased that frequency to every week. We increased the number of locations that we were distributing. We implemented a new mobile food pantry to try to address some of those other barriers that people experience trying to access food. We partnered with the National Guard and at one point in time had 30 National Guard members here helping us with the food distribution system. Also AmeriCorps members. We have 6 AmeriCorps members helping in our food distribution system. And I think one of the things that's important to point out is 12 months ago, this time in 2020, we had 2 full-time people in our food distribution system as employees. Today, that number is 21. Our facility has gone from 5,000 square feet of warehouse facility for food storage and operations to 25,000 square feet. So a significant difference there in the amount of labor and just operation space that it's taking.
Thanks.
Oh, I can go next if that's okay. My name is Thom, again with Serve Wenatchee Valley, and we have been in existence for about 20 years. Provided food to 5 different food banks in our community. They'd come into our central office, and then we would refer out to those food banks. The pandemic hitting a year ago changed that model as we were trying to address food security and delivery while keeping the community safe. And so we put together, along with community action at the Town Toyota Center, a distribution, area out of that space. Every time I have this conversation, I've got to shout out the Town Toyota Center for their incredible access to that resource to be able to address, food security in this community. And we did a drive-through model, no-touch drive-through model, where folks once a week would drive through and pick up. That increased our delivery system by about 700% over what we were doing prior to the pandemic. We did that for about 19 weeks, and then we shifted to and created the Fresh Hope Market. And the Fresh Hope Market was created to be able to offer food choice to families so they could come in, as opposed to the food boxes that we were providing to give families the opportunity to shop for their needs. We do that on a point system. They call in and register, and we have one guest every half hour is how we have monitored that. We anticipate, as restrictions continue and we move forward in phases, that we will be able to increase that access. And so we also participated with the county on a emergency food assistance program where we were delivering, working with, again, the Town Toyota Center, put together the boxes, but we were just coordinating getting food delivered to families that were isolating and quarantining at home throughout Chelan and Douglas counties. That program is continuing through the end of April, and so there is access to food there that is available, to come through that program as well. So I think that kind of highlights what we're bless you what we're doing.
Well, I'll go next. I'm Tracy, First United Methodist Church, speaking on behalf of the Little Essentials Pantry. And we really morphed into something different because we used to do the Packing Friendship, which a lot of people are familiar with. Those that aren't familiar with that, it's just where we get bags of food and provide it to different schools around. So kids that are relying on breakfast and lunch have something for the weekend. Because there was no school, we went to into this, put all the food on a cart and stuck it outside. And it isn't our program, actually. It's a program called, it's called many different things in many areas. The Blessing Boxes are in the Seattle area. So we just mirrored their program, and we're up to, I think, 10 different pantries now that we've seeded in the area. We're hoping to really have at least 100, if not more, in the area. And it's essentially just a cabinet. Ours is a cart filled with essential items for people to take what they need and leave what they can. It's a non-judgmental, because we don't see them at all. They come in, it's very private. They can come in any time that it's out there. Some pantries are 24/7 in the valley. Ours is Monday through Friday from 8 till about 6 at night. It's refurbished 3 to 4 times a day. The other pantries are refurbished at different times. I'm not quite sure what and how. So it's been quite a whirlwind of lessons and how to do it. It's been a success, if you call that a success.
I can follow up on that. Thanks, Tracy. My name's Kim again. I'm with the organization Classroom in Bloom. We're a nonprofit. Specifically, we're affiliated with the Methodist Valley School District, and we are a school farm that formulated about 17 years ago on the school district campus. And so we serve, right now we're up to about, I think it's 520 or so students that are K through 12, so kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We've been expanding our operations, and so we work with a conservation district in Okanagan, and we are now working with all the schools throughout all of the Okanagan region. And so that's been a really great positive for just for our region. And when it comes down to the food security issues, what we're really working hard on is getting food into the bellies of our children. And so that's why I said thanks, Tracy, because it's a great follow-up. So the Friday Foods program is what we call it here at the school district in the Methodist Valley, and it's just such an amazing way to get food home for these children and for their families. Obviously, that affects everyone in their family. And so what we have it's about 1.5 acres at this point, and we've been expanding and growing. So on campus, this little farm that we run, maintain, and all the children help basically grow their own food. And the food is about, well, up until this year, up until last year, it was about 3,000 pounds of food would go into the school cafeterias. And so then the school staff actually have a scratch kitchen, and they take all the food that we grow, they process it and serve it on the school lunch lines. So obviously that's really significant, because when you have a 40 to 80%, depending on your school district, when you have that much of free and reduced lunch programs, those are the children who are mostly getting that fresh food. And so with COVID, so that's one of our main goals. We have many, but that's one of them. Kind of the education component and the nutrition component is also huge, because as children learn how to grow carrots, they also learn how to enjoy them, because they grew it with their own 2 hands. Pulling it out of the dirt and eating that there's nothing more rewarding from a 5-year-old to a 12-year-old, or to a 17-year-old. Everyone loves that. So it's a very feel good. We see really great quick impacts on the work that we do. COVID changed a lot for us. We usually have 400 hands a week in the garden. And as we all know, when school closed in March of 2020, we just lost. That is a lot of helping hands to grow 1.5 acres of food. So we had a couple of just fantastic volunteers, and our staff just jumped on board, and we did it all without the kids. And so that was at least for the spring. But what we had planned on is we had just done a big expansion. So with all this extra food we were growing, we were growing salad greens for the school cafeteria, and that's a lot of greens. So we were harvesting about 20 pounds a week of greens. We were individually bagging them and taking to our food bank. We took them to elders' homes. We took them to some of our social services. So we started delivering food out into the community, and it was a really fantastic reminder to ourselves that we have our school cafeteria, and that's one avenue, but we also felt like, oh my gosh, we really actually can serve so many more. And it like I said, it had just occurred that we now grew 5,000 pounds. We grew about almost 6,000 pounds of food this year. And it was a really concerted effort to get more food into our community, more healthy, fresh, right straight from the ground. So that was really fantastic. We sent home lessons. We sent home boxes. We were part of the school program, to the summer lunch program. So we would actually just take boxes of zucchinis or Zucchinis, everyone loves zucchinis, right? But cucumbers and tomatoes, and we would take them to once a week, we would drop them basically at the school pickup lunch zones. And then any family could just take whatever food they wanted home with them. So that felt really good. And it was also just a really important way just to get fresh food home again for everyone. Trying to think. We did a lot of things like provided extra childcare. We do have a really safe space. So we feel lucky that it's an outdoor garden. So we actually have children. We've had children. We had summer camps. We had childcare for essential working families all the way from summer all the way till currently. And because we're outdoors in the garden, even in the wintertime with snow, they put on their snow clothes and they're still walking around the garden and seeing what birds are, utilizing that space in the middle of the winter. And building suet feeders, chopping up carrots and harvesting seeds that we put aside for the students to work on this time of the year, packaging them up. So that's generally, the pandemic has given us lots of opportunities just to serve our community as best as possible.
Neat. I think I'm up. It's really cool to hear about all this stuff. I thought I knew what was going on in the valley, but it's, there's a lot more cool stuff than I thought. So again, I manage the Community Cupboard Food Bank in Leavenworth. The Community Cupboard is a program of Upper Valley MEND, which is an umbrella nonprofit human service organization. And MEND stands for Meeting Each Need with Dignity. And I think I would say that that's kind of the approach we take to all of our services, in particular the food bank, is trying to honor that mission. And so, pre-COVID, we had our food bank set up like a grocery store model, similar to what Thom's describing. Maybe we had a point system where people could come and go throughout the month and use their points as they wished, based on household size. It would determine the number of points. But then since COVID hit, we changed up our model to do more of a curbside pickup. We tried to preserve the element of choice by basically creating a shopping sheet where people could tick off the items that they want. They'd hand it to staff, and staff would do the shopping for them and deliver the food box to them. And so that's been it hasn't been as appealing as a shopping model where you can come and go as much as you want, but at least it maintained the element of choice. One thing we did this summer, which has been significant, we put a similar to maybe what Tracy is doing with her program, but we put a refrigerator outside the food bank. And actually, out of necessity, we were closed for a while, and we wanted to keep we get a lot of grocery rescue. In the summertime, we have a gleaning program where we collect food from farms and orchards and gardens and backyards, and wherever people have excess food that they want to come to feed hungry people, we go out and collect it. We need to keep that moving. And so we put a refrigerator outside and just kept filling it with food. And we just realized very quickly that was a very appealing option for folks. And so we upgraded our fridge. We now have like a weather appropriate one that can be in, low temperatures in the wintertime. And we've got it outside. And I guess I'd say that one of the things we've seen is a lot more people that may not have otherwise come to use the food bank are starting to access that. I think they appreciate the element of anonymity. There's whenever they want to come and get it, they can. So we've seen a lot of that. But I would also say, things we do to kind of honor folks. We try to have culturally appropriate foods available at the food bank. We've made an effort to get a lot of things like masa flour and tortillas and beans and that kind of thing for our Hispanic families, that kind of stuff. We have bilingual staff members. With COVID, we started a food box delivery service as well. So folks that had a hard time getting out could still access food. So those are kind of the main things, but I'd say the biggest, most impactful service has been having just a bunch of food outside that people can come and get whenever they want. And that's been something people have really taken advantage of. So we'll keep that going for sure in the future.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I know that, the reason I phrased the first question is for you to tell us what you do, plus how that's changed is because just how everything has changed so much. So I wanted to get a little bit idea. This next question has to do with kind of, are there a lot? Maybe it should be, sorry, I'm trying to decide how I want to ask this question. I'm assuming that there are more people than I even who are facing insecurity in our community than I would imagine. So for our viewers who we have, I personally am thankful that I am not in a situation where I have that problem, but it's not something that I maybe think about on a day-to-day basis. If there's a food drive, I have donated and participated, but that has not been a challenge that I have had to face. So can you tell us, and I don't know if you know specific statistics for how much of our population is facing food insecurity, but is this I don't even, to say, is this a problem in our community, or is this an issue in our community, seems like, well, duh, obviously there are people using these services. So tell me, and maybe not with numbers, but if you have those, that's great. But give us an idea of impact for people who don't think of this topic a lot.
I just want to talk about that on an emotional level, in that the church that I represent, I would say, is a middle to upper middle class church, congregants, and the outreach that we do is very much out of their sight. They write a check and then our mission team takes care of it. But the pantry, when it moved outside and they actually see family members coming and they see that the food that we have in our parlor was, just a lot of food, I believe it's been a real eye opener for those that had no idea. They've read about it, they've heard about it, they give $25 every once in a while. But I've seen an uptick of our congregants going, wow, we had no idea at all. So that, I guess that would be one of the things that I have noticed, that those that had no idea are just becoming more aware. And maybe it's their neighbors. Maybe it's someone that was going to retire in 3 years, but they got let go early. And there's just so many stories out there that are affecting those that don't have stories yet. Their story, they're okay, but their friends are not.
Well, what struck me when I was researching this topic to prepare for today was that, we think of people who are hungry or starving as just the people who don't have food or don't know where their next meal is going to come from or when. But food insecurity is more than just that, not knowing, but it's not having access to food that meets your dietary needs for an active and healthy life. So that is a significant difference than just not eating anything at all. but that is a lot more. It encompasses a lot more people than what readily comes to mind.
Yeah, and I would tell you that out of the 25 to 45 people that visit the cart a day, I would guess that at least 75% of the guests are not homeless at all. They're not dead drop poor.
Yeah, I think I would add that that there's still a very much a stigma associated with accessing food and using a food bank. And I think similar to what Tracy is describing, we've seen just putting it out there for people to take whenever they want. Oftentimes it's after hours at night or wherever, early in the morning, has been really important. I think anything we can do to create in our various communities, and I don't just mean the towns, but even the little neighborhoods in those towns, ways for people to access food that is sort of free of strings and all that kind of stuff. I guess, my personal thought is it should be a right for all of us to not, to have access to food. So, but I think it's important to create those little systems or programs where people can have access to it in a sort of safe and supportive environment, whatever that looks like. So I love the idea of the neighborhood, food pantries, or however you describe that, as almost like the neighborhood libraries.
It is. It's based on the library, actually.
Yeah.
I would add, just in terms of trying to quantify the many that kind of is implied in the question, that prior to COVID, Serve Wenatchee is a homeless prevention organization that provides rent assistance and utility assistance and any really assistance that is needed to be able to keep a family home. Food is certainly a significant part of that, because if we can save money from going out and purchasing food, we're saving money for the family to be able to safely stay home, to be used for rent or utilities. Prior to COVID, we about 61% of the folks that we saw were accessing food as a resource they needed. We are close to 80% through COVID and post-COVID of that number. And that to me quantifies certainly the need that exists, because the dramatic increase in the number of folks that are coming to access that. And again, I think has been referenced here, is that there are folks that are coming and searching for food that have never sought public assistance at all. They've never been in that moment. And so we know that is an increase, and whether that's a kind of a COVID blip on the radar, or whether, none of us know the horizon on the, well, maybe Alan does, but nobody knows the horizon on this to say that we're going to be done with COVID in 2 years or 1 year, or we don't know the horizon on that. And I really look at both with the data and anecdotally that this food security is going to be something that we are going to be addressing. Well, it has been something that we've addressing as Alan referenced for 56 years. You've been working in the area of food security, but this is going to be something that is going to be a system-wide thing that we are going to address for years to come. Not only as it relates to COVID, but just in our culture in which we live.
And isn't it kind of sad, Thom, and as Bob said, that we've labeled that makes you a lesser person because you're hungry? I mean, it's too bad that that pride keeps us away from the food bank.
Mm-hmm.
In a comment, first I really love that model, just the neighborhood model. And I was just thinking of little libraries as you were talking about that, Bob and Tracy. It takes a lot of that anonymity can be very valuable, is what it comes down to. The one other thing I think that's really an important piece of this puzzle right now is how things have changed, is there's an exodus from the cities. There's been this, and we can just assume that maybe this is a COVID related and people will go back to their jobs and whatnot, but I'm sure that Wenatchee, Chelan, Okanagan, the Methodist Valley, everyone's had this really interesting influx of beautiful humans, but they come from a wealthier status. And when we talk about food accessibility, I can watch one of our grocery stores, for example, it just gets more and more expensive. And those are the products that are needed, and the products that are being sold so readily from folks who are coming from a higher status or a higher socioeconomic part of our communities. And so that, we are going to have more food access issues as the price of goods goes up and the inflation rates change. And that's also been really significant for us here in the Methodist Valley. And it's hurting our very small community in a lot of ways, but it's also bringing influx of the people who didn't, they're ready to open their wallets. So that's why I say it's a really interesting conundrum to be under. So I think our small rural Eastern Washington is going to see more and more of this over time. That comes with population growth, but also with, I think, where our times are right now.
And I think just before we leave this, I totally agree that the stigma that's associated with it is really challenging. And I think it's even been more challenging the last approximately 1 year, where we've had to shift to this just to meet the need because it was so great. And I say it was so great. So if we take a snapshot of February 2019, we were assisting around 2,000 people a month. If we take a snapshot of February 2020, that number is close to 12,000.
Alan, what was the first figure you said? 2019 was what?
2,000. And today, 12,000. Those are duplicated numbers. It's not 12,000 unique individuals every month, but 12,000 however you want to phrase that, people actually, but the same for a year ago. So sixfold number. And if you equate that down to the amount of food, it's close to 70,000 pounds of food a week. If you see a semi truck rolling down the highway, it's hauling 40,000 pounds. So roughly 2 semi loads a week going out into our communities throughout Chelan-Douglas County. And that's still with the stigma attached to it. And that it's not a pretty system, if you will, to access. It's not fun to stand and to sit in a line in your car to access a box of food. So people, that 2,000 number was pretty consistent, and now all of a sudden this 12,000 number has been really consistent the last 11 months. So obviously it's people that have never had to reach out for help before, all of a sudden now are having to reach out. And how do we emerge and shift from the system that we had to put in place to meet that high demand to one that lowers that barrier to access, so you don't have to sit in your car, so you can come in, as Bob offers and as Thom offers, that grocery store type of environment, and you can select what it is that you and your family need. That's something we want to get to on a very large scale, and fortunately and thankful, Bob and Thom are both meeting it on a smaller scale. But how do we as a community get to a point where we can do that on a large scale, and then at the same time take our new mobile food pantry and reach those communities that are really isolated. If you think about Manson or Pashashton or Monitor or Malaga, where access to food is even more difficult, if we can get that closer to them and let them come through the mobile unit and select what it is that they need. And I want to make sure that people understand that you may have a picture of your mind of what's being distributed, and I want to be sure that it's a clear picture, that it is fresh produce, it is fresh fruit, it's frozen meat products, dry goods as well, but very little prepared foods are being distributed. It really is fresh products, canned goods, canned beans, canned fruit, fresh fruit. It's really a wide variety. And we're trying to, just as everybody else is, to meet people and their own personal nutritional needs.
Thank you. Can we maybe this will help address some of the stigma associated, can you talk to me about what the impacts are to adults and children who face food insecurity? So, I know there's education and health. Can you talk a little bit about the things that trickles down that maybe is associated to food insecurity, but it's not or it's a cause of food insecurity also causes other problems?
I can
Well,
just
I would just throw in that I think we've already referenced shaming, shame is something that attaches what you need to your identity, and that's what happens in shaming. And so you may have need for food that is there, that is it's driving you to reach out, but when that attachment comes with it of shame, it actually causes you to avoid the very thing that you need for the most help, because there's this picture, and I think that's one of the biggest effects on on both adults and children. Being in school, and there are folks on here, probably Kim can address this better than I can, but as a parent of 5, the free and reduced lunch program at school, raise your hands if you're part of the free and reduced lunch program. That's just in and of itself, it's sort of a shaming question. It's not just gathering data, but and folks are stepping into that, and that's part of reducing the significance of that shaming model in our community. And I think part of the value of conversations like this.
I think that's great, Thom. I agree. And I'll just speak a little bit to children. I'm going to kind of do two different directions here. One is stress. I mean, the stress that people take on, whether it's from shaming or it's just from the stress of not knowing, that has significant social emotional health consequences. And when you're talking about children, we can see that in behavior. We can see that in, personality, mood swings. We can see that in just sleepiness, and children act out in different ways. One personality type might act big because of stress, and one might be very introverted because of stress. And so it's really, I'll put a shout out there to all the educators out there, all these teachers that have a big job recognizing why a child is behaving the way they are. Is it because they're hungry? Is it because they're stressed? Is it because their parents aren't at work today? What is that? So food insecurity is humongous when it comes to that social emotional health. And I'm just this is not 100%. I want other people to say more about that. But one thing I was just thinking about too, schools are an amazing way to be able to provide a shameless way. There's the free and reduced lunch, but if everyone, for example, if every child had a snack at lunch that wasn't based on what granola bar you had in your backpack, but if schools could provide healthy, safe snacks for every child in the school, for example, that would take a lot of stigma out of who's going to go up to the teacher or who goes to the box, whatever that looks like. And that's something that we've been talking about at our school a lot recently. And it's been interesting that we haven't been able to get a grant for a snack program for the children so that they can all have one fresh, healthy snack. And there's other priorities, of course, but it's just an interesting, how can we make things feel equitable? And so anyways, that was just something that was just on my mind when I think about, one thing that we did, I just think about the food shopping that we've had it's been a really powerful experience, is that we've been building recipe cards, and then the kids come and they actually shop, and it's on a classroom by classroom basis. They come and shop in the greenhouse for all the fresh foods that go into that recipe. And we actually bring the recipe in little cups, and they get to taste it, and they use their 5 senses to describe this food that they are eating. And then they go, they shop, they take their food, they all put it in a box, and they take it home to their families to make a recipe at home with their at home with whoever their family members are that they're participating with. But what's been really, I've had actually people say, I got a can of organic, coconut milk, and I felt so bad because we have lots of that. And I was like, but the point is, every child got it. And so no one felt like, I don't get a box, because every 4th grader wants a box. They want to take all that food home. Anyways, it just is it's really a thought that comes to mind of how important our schools can be for the children of our communities, and the ways that we can make it not shameful, and we can make it equitable, and we can serve everyone. So just thoughts.
Great.
I want to say one more thing about that. I think one of the benefits of the pantry that I've seen also is that those that are in need of the food that's on the pantry, which I want to add at a later time today, is one of the products that it's not just food, it's soap and toothpaste, and that stuff we can't keep in stock. But where I want to go here is we get a lot of food left from people that are needing food, but they give because it feels good, right? And it makes them feel like they're not just taking, they're givers as well. And they love giving, and they put notes. We just didn't need this. And a lot of it is from the food bank, Ellen, that they get that they don't need, but how wonderful that they feel like I can help. And I love those notes and those little things. So I think that in a way I agree with you, Kim, everybody is in the kitchen at the same time. Everybody is treated. And that's a way to get to this place of not shaming. It shouldn't be shameful to be hungry.
I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more thing. everybody on the planet stands at a point of need at some point in their life. The difference is that many of us that are on this call today have spheres of influence or relationships or family that can step in and meet this need at this moment of time. And so I think that the shaming comes from the need, but if we're really honest, every one of us has needs that we need to have met. The difference is, where do we go to have that need met? Maybe I or others on this call have the ability to do that under the radar a little bit more than community-wide by reaching out to a family member, but the need should not create the shame, because every one of us stand at a point of need at some point in our lives.
You know, when you were talking earlier, it actually reminded me that as a child, I attended the summer lunch programs, and I remember being really shy and embarrassed about going to get breakfast or lunch during those programs. But I had forgotten that was part of my for a time when I was a child that we did that. But I did feel that embarrassment even at a young age to be, you know, and they were fun programs with activities too. So I don't know why that was at such a young age that I felt embarrassed by it, but I did. Do you guys feel, I know that each city or whatever affordability is for different needs is different based on your demographics. So locally, is access to food affordable, accessible? Overall, do we have alternative sources of food? Do we have just ability to meet needs?
I don't think that's a good question for us, because we might all go, sure, yeah, we got plenty. We're working really hard at making sure. I think that's a great question for somebody who needs it, you know, who works 3 jobs just to barely make it and has 3 kids at home. And, you know, that's a good question for them. Are we meeting your needs? Is this community helping? Because I don't know that answer.
I don't know that answer, Tracy. I would say that just from a personal experience, our household budget for food has certainly increased, even though our food choices and consumption has not changed. And you know, I have a brother down in Texas, and so we talk about this some too. And just the average cost of goods are certainly less for him than for us at the grocery store. And a couple weeks ago, we were down in Arizona visiting some friends and went to the grocery store and just seeing, wow, you know, there is a difference. So that particular side of the question, I can say, or I certainly experience what I think to be an increased cost in food products over the last 12 months. Whole different array of reasons for that, of course. And we're starting to see that as well with getting the products out to.
I think you got muted somehow in the middle of that.
Sorry about that. I did that to myself. I was trying to get something else off the screen. So just how do we continue to meet the needs of families and individuals in our area, and are we? I think that's a huge question, and you know, we try, I think, is what the bottom line is, but are we doing everything we can? It'd be great to know the answer to that question.
No, I agree.
I might add, we're talking about, I think, supply and demand, and so certainly supply, you know, is coming in. I think we've identified that the demand is there, but I think the interesting part of that question is access. And
I agree.
you know, one of the things that you look at, I've got a walk score app on my phone that I use, and just every once in a while, what it does is you click an address or a location you are, and it'll give you a walk score based on access to things like food, school, medical facilities, different things like that. And so where I live up on Western in Wenatchee, my walk score is about 52. It's a scale of 1 to 100. The higher the walk score, the more access you have. Some of our, I would say, poorest areas in Wenatchee are the lowest walk score areas. There are some very, impoverished segments of our community that have a walk score of less than 10. And so in that, I think that identifies the value of some of the remote access to foods that are being done, that Tracy is talking about, getting some of those to make those more walkable and more accessible. I really think access is one of the significant things, because I do think we have a fairly significant amount of supply that's coming in. And again, I think the demand is there, but community-wide, I think the access creates the biggest challenge.
I agree with you, Thom, 100%.
Yeah, I think this is where something like the mobile food pantry that Alan and the Community Action Council folks have got going on is great, because it gets out into those rural areas. I was looking at the food desert map yesterday that USDA has, and it was pretty revealing how I think it's all of Douglas County. There's even places in Wenatchee that are considered food deserts.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great to have that access to get out to those more rural areas. And I would just add that, similar to what Kim was describing, like we're trending in the direction of this being a less affordable place to live. I mean, I know here in Leavenworth, it's just the increased costs for everything is going up. I mean, I think one of the realities of the COVID situation is people can now work from anywhere, and so they're moving to places that are very appealing, like this valley, and in doing that, it increases the cost of living. So I think we're trending in that direction, and the more access we can create, the better, through the mobile pantries, through the community food boxes. I'm sorry, Tracy, I can't remember how you described that service, but that's those types of things I think are going to be important in the future.
Hey, Bob, you mentioned the food desert. For our viewers who may not know that term, can you give us like a brief description of a food desert and explain a little bit like how it impacts our community?
Sure. Well, full transparency here, I actually called Alan yesterday to get his to get a definition, because I wasn't sure. And I'm still not totally clear, but there's something about the distance that you are from a grocery store, a certain number of miles, access to certain services you have within that distance. But I don't know that I'm the best person to actually offer a definition. Maybe Alan has a better sense of that.
I think you did the big overview there, Bob, just fine. And it's U.S. Department of Agriculture does a survey of areas based on census tracts. And so if you're rural setting and you are, and it's not just walking distance that Thom was kind of talking about there a little bit, but this is within 10 miles of access to a grocery store or supermarket. And all of Douglas County, with the exception of a small portion of East Wenatchee area there, is identified as not having access, having to travel more than 10 miles to get access to a grocery store or supermarket. So that's significant. That's lots of barriers.
I'll add
It
to
was
that,
much
Alan.
of Eastern Washington too, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Kim.
No worries about that. I was just going to say another huge barrier, and I know Wenatchee has the best ever when I'm there, but the rest of our region, North Central Washington, public transportation. We have no transportation to get people from one place to the other. And even we have a new program, but it is very inaccessible. So getting people to and from these places, even if you live on the outskirts of town and it's a 10 mile, 5 mile, 3 mile walk, whatever it is to get into town, and there's no sidewalks, there's no pedestrian, ways to do that.
Or a handicap accessibility to get cleared through. We did a forum last month on transportation, access to transportation. So it really does tie into a lot to this conversation and others. We talked a lot in that one about affordable housing, because that was another topic that we have covered in this series. And so they do tie in. I wanted to ask, as for the listeners, community members like me, how can we support you or help you? What is it that you need? You know, there's food drives that we get asked to participate in, whether it's at a grocery store or through a church or other school. Are there items that you would prefer? It sounds like a lot of you guys, or most of you, all of you are doing like fresh fruit, which is amazing, and that you're able to provide that. But is there a way for the communities to support you in that effort to get fresh food to people who need it? Is what you need more volunteers, or what are the options? Is just giving donations, is that the biggest help that we can give?
So I'd like to jump in right now, because put a pantry in your neighborhood.
There you go.
Have a pantry and get your whole block to take it on and say, okay, we'll take Monday, we'll take Tuesday, and get your whole family, get the kids making sure, hey, you know, we're out of peanut butter up there, Mom. And so, yeah, a pantry in every neighborhood. Can you imagine? I can't. I think it'd be great.
Mhm.
Do you have a list of the pantries that you have currently that you know of that are operating?
Oh, I do have that list.
Can you send it to me? Because we'll post it on our website later onto our social justice page, so that it's available to anyone listening.
I would love to, yes.
You know, I just wanted to take a minute to offer kudos to this valley, and in particular the Upper Valley. I mean, it's been such an overwhelming response as a result of COVID. I mean, the flip side of all this is we've had huge amounts of support. I mean, community members, business owners, hotel owners, and a lot of people have stepped up and contributed. So I just really want to mention that, just the flip side. There's been a lot of support, I know, in this valley, I think throughout the valley. So,
yeah.
And I would just, you're specific to your question, Ashley, I would tout our community harvest gleaning program. And that's to say that, you know, we love volunteers, and during the summer months, we're out there and, like I said, orchards and gardens and farms, and more hands, the better to pick those veggies. And we circulate them through the Community Action Council's food distribution center. They get the food out to all the food banks in Chelan-Douglas counties. So the more food we can glean, the better off we are. And there's an abundance of fresh local produce here in the summertime. And there needs to be more hands out there gleaning it, more than just our program. So the more hands, the better.
So we could contact Upper Valley Mint and ask to be contacted when there is gleaning, so that we could come out and help out.
Yeah, you can get you on an email list, and you'll get a notification every time we do a glean, which is frequent.
Great, that's good to know.
Just a small extension on that. We're piloting a new program with Bob and his team up there this year, where we'll be taking fresh fruits and produce items, and those that might be not necessarily shelf stable for very long. And we're working with local processors then to turn those into items that can be frozen. So sauces and soups and jams and things like that can be frozen, and then we'll distribute those items come next winter. So
Cool, Alan, that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, thanks to Bob too. He's helping us out a bunch on that one.
It feels like it's kind of a missing link in the food distribution circle, you know, that processing piece. So we're going to attempt to address that this summer.
Oh, Thom, you're muted.
So that does address, you know, that when you are dealing with gleaning and you're dealing with perishable, you've got a shelf life that, you know, is fairly short. And so the ability to get it distributed, and that program does address that in a significant way. That you know, so distributing, it's one thing to get access to those, but you have to be able to, you know, get it out, have it refrigerated to extend the shelf life on it, and things like that. And so we have a couple of coolers that we're able to put things in, but it's not, you know, large square footage, you know, of coolers to be able to hold that. And so I love the description of that program for that reason. Great job, guys.
We have a question, and I'm sorry, I didn't come across this, so I don't know what it is. They would like an update on the grocery rescue program in our area. If any of you know what that is, explain it first and then tell us what the update is on it.
Sure. So I think Thom's probably involved in this as well, and a couple of other organizations also. So grocery rescue is simply when grocery stores have a abundance of product that they're not able to move that is getting close to the end of its shelf life. They set those products aside then to be picked up by local food distribution organizations like Thom, like ourselves. And so we, on a daily basis, visit local grocery stores. They have those items set aside. We pick them up and get them into our distribution system then. So the grocery rescue process is still going strong in the area. We have seen it kind of taper off a little bit. There's less product, and we talked about that as a group here as well, just that supply and demand piece. But it's still very active, and we have picked up a couple new partners in that process as well. I think Leavenworth, Bob, you do that up in Leavenworth too. So
we do, and I was just going to mention it's coordinated on a higher level by Second Harvest program. But yeah, we do it 6 days a week. Every day we're open basically at the food bank, and I think it's I mean, our local Safeway store, it's like it's thousands of pounds of food a week. So it's been really helpful for folks. And that's oftentimes the stuff that we put out in the refrigerator and the stuff we need to move, and it moves.
One more thing I was going to ask for is if there's like a list of like a list for what you put in a neighborhood pantry, like what are the top 10 things or the neighborhood pantries, if we're going to start one, or if we wanted to contribute to one that's already there, what should we be looking to add?
We actually have a list. I'll send that to you as well. I am sorry to say that it's very hard for us to do fresh stuff because it is totally exposed to the air and to the weather. In the winter, we find ourselves able to do some fruits and vegetables. They last a little bit longer, but in the summer, things just, it's not good. I love the idea of the refrigerator. I don't know, it must be my age, but I always think of refrigerators as, you know, you're supposed to have them all sealed up and so no one can get in and get trapped in there. Used to be big fear when I was a kid. If you saw a refrigerator, it was like, stay away. Don't want to get trapped in there. But
that says a lot. That says a lot about the type of refrigerator that you grew up with.
Yeah, it's so funny that I think that. But I look forward to talking to Bob more about how that would work, because I could see us getting more involved in that. But we do mostly just canned, bagged stuff like that, pastas. But the big ticket items that we cannot keep in stock: toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning, toothpaste, brush, soap, deodorant, stuff that you know, they just don't, if you have to choose between feeding your family or making sure they're clean, they're going to go for the food, rightfully so. But so anyway, there you have it. And during COVID, the cleaning stuff is very important.
and one of the new items we've been distributing are personal protective equipment. So
and masks. We have masks.
Masks going out through the food boxes on a fairly regular basis. Yeah.
Yep, we do that too. I forgot. Thanks for reminding me, Ellen.
Just going to put in a little plug too, just as another one of those ideas about how we can create that accessibility throughout our communities is, does everyone remember the Victory Gardens after World War II? And the idea was that you're feeding your neighbors. And you know, I don't know if anyone in this audience is a gardener, but you know, seeds, you cannot get seeds right now. Like there is a shortage of seed, and that happened last year. People couldn't find potatoes to plant, and some of the largest seed companies, they're out of seeds. They've sold them all. And so just taking care of each other in our smaller neighborhoods and a community pea patch, however we can, we talk a lot about that within our organization, is just how can we create some more small farms on the landscape that are just available for anyone to go and help a hand, you know, go pull some weeds, go put some, you know, give a little water, give a little love and tender care, and then come reap the harvest benefits of that too. So that's just another little plug for our farmers. The more food we can grow, the more we can feed each other.
Well, we have come to 1 o'clock, so we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you everyone for joining us in the Social Justice Community Forum series. If you have a topic that you would like us to add to our series on social justice, you can add a comment or chat for us here, or you can email us at info@wvmcc.org. I would like to thank all of our panelists for your time, and I loved learning more about this topic from each of you. And thank you to the audience for participating and asking questions today. We hope you'll be able to join us again, because we are going to continue this conversation. So thank you all. Is there any last things you want to add before we go?
Well, I want to add one thing, that if you are interested in getting a little essential pantry into your neighborhood, we have the startup money to start that for you. So it doesn't cost or take any energy at all. We'll get you the cart, we'll get you the signs, and we'll get you $200 worth of supplies just to start it off.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.